Saint Felix of Nola was born early in the 3rd century in the small Italian town of Nola, near Naples. He was the eldest son of Hermias, a retired Syrian centurion who had settled in Campania. Raised in a family of means, Felix learned generosity from an early age. When his father died, Felix inherited a sizable estate. Instead of keeping his wealth, he sold most of his possessions and distributed the proceeds to the poor. Freed from material concerns, he discerned a call to the priesthood. Bishop Maximus of Nola ordained him and quickly came to rely on his prudence and pastoral zeal. Around 250 AD, the Roman Emperor Decius launched one of the empire's fiercest persecutions of Christians. Bishop Maximus went into hiding to protect his flock, but Felix stayed in Nola to comfort the faithful. Roman soldiers arrested him, beat him and chained him in prison. According to accounts preserved by Saint Paulinus of Nola and other early writers, an angel appeared to Felix in his cell at night and told him that Bishop Maximus was in peril. Miraculously, his chains fell off, and the prison door opened. Felix escaped, found the bishop cold and starving in a cave, and carried him to safety. They hid in an abandoned building. Tradition says that a spider quickly spun a web over the entrance, deceiving the pursuing soldiers into thinking the place had long been unoccupied. This story explains why Felix became associated with the protection of spiders and with divine providence using humble means. After the death of Decius and the cessation of the persecution, Felix returned to his pastoral duties. He harbored no resentment toward his persecutors and refused to reclaim the property confiscated during his imprisonment. Instead, he rented a few acres of land and farmed them to support himself. Whatever surplus he had, he shared with those poorer than himself. When Bishop Maximus died, the community begged Felix to succeed him. Felix declined, recommending an older priest named Quintus. His refusal reflects his humility and his understanding that leadership in the church is a service, not a mark of prestige. For the remainder of his life, Felix lived quietly as a priest. He preached, celebrated the sacraments, visited the sick and comforted those still suffering from the trauma of persecution. He cultivated his small plot of land and maintained an intense life of prayer. His simplicity and charity attracted many. Over time, stories spread of his miraculous protection of fugitives and his intercessory power. Although he is sometimes referred to as a martyr, historical evidence suggests that he survived his tortures and died a natural death around 260 AD on January 14. The Church honors him as a confessor and martyr because he endured brutal treatment for his faith. He was buried at Simidal near Nola, where his tomb became a site of pilgrimage. 5 churches were eventually built in his honor there, and some of his relics were taken to Rome and Benevento. A century later, Saint Paulinus of Nola wrote 14 poems extolling Felix's virtues and miracles, helping to spread his cult throughout Italy and beyond. Pope Damasus and Saint Augustine also praised him in verse and prose. The example of Felix of Nola teaches that sanctity flourishes in humility and charity. He demonstrates that one can endure suffering without bitterness and remain faithful without seeking honors. By relinquishing his wealth, embracing voluntary poverty and declining the episcopacy, he placed the needs of others before his own ambitions. His legend of the spider reminds us that God can work through the smallest creatures and simplest situations. Today, the Canadian liturgical calendar commemorates him on January 14 along with the Universal Church. His life challenges us to be generous with our resources, courageous when tested and steadfast in supporting those who lead us in faith. Through his intercession, we ask for the grace to serve quietly and love wholeheartedly.